what's an MVP and what's a prototype and what's a full-fledged product, and how do you guys go about distinguishing this product for founders?
Yeah, so a prototype is typically a set of wireframes that have been designed. And if anybody doesn't know what a wireframe is, it's basically like a skeleton design of a screen. So it could be like a web application, a mobile app, or some sort of software application. So think about all the screens have been designed in very like rudimentary format, like not much graphics and maybe a little bit of color or maybe even black and white. And essentially these are kind of mapped together, right, to illustrate the different user journeys of the product. So the user, typically the founder, can click through the different screens and mimic what a user would experience, but without any functionality. So for example, there's a sign-up process and the user has to complete a form or maybe a bunch of steps in the sign-up process. Once they've completed it, there's a success message, then maybe they need to validate their email from a link that's sent to the email account. So there'll be like a validation screen. So it basically will like highlight those steps in a very quick and easy to understand and visual format. I think that's key, is like people, learn and understand visually much easier, but it helps them to basically play around with different user journeys. But just to reiterate, there's no functionality that's been developed at all in this stage. So like when you're signing up, there's nothing that's getting saved or anything like that. So that's a prototype. And then an MVP, and I know we'll talk a lot about MVPs, basically consists of building, again, whatever it is, like a web app or mobile app or website, whatever the client needs. And it's basically the most leanest and minimal set of features and functionality to launch with. So that users can basically test whether their idea or concept has got traction. So it shouldn't include nice to have features or features that aren't necessarily needed for launch, hence the name minimum viable product.
Hi, welcome to the show. If this is your first time here or you are a returning listener or viewer and you haven't done so yet, hit the like and subscribe button down below. Be much appreciated. And of course, if you're very intrigued with regards to what's happening in the startup scene, then definitely hit that like and subscribe button down below, and hope you look forward to the show. So welcome to another episode of From Garage to Growth. I'm your host, Brian. And today I'm welcomed by Angelo. And Angelo is the CEO of Elemental, and they generally focus on web development and software development. And on today's episode, we're going to explore Angelo's journey and what Elemental does and the journey of a CEO, and focus on how to build MVPs to a degree. So I'd just like to give you the floor, Angelo. Introduce yourself and let the audience know who you are.
Yeah, good morning, Brian, and good morning to all the listeners. Just firstly, I'd like to extend a big thank you, to you for the invite to be on this podcast. Secondly, like really excited to get into this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. As you mentioned, I'm the CEO of Elemental, a web and software development company based in Cape Town. And keen to share, insights, experience, and any knowledge that can benefit the listeners.
Yeah. So can you take us back to the beginning of this journey in 2005? What was the catalyst for starting Elemental? What did you guys see within the tech space that you're like, oh, this is needed right now, and we kind of can bring it into the tech space?
Yeah, so my journey actually started a little bit before 2005. It was around 2002. I was finishing studying, and then I was doing an internship at Dimension Data, who at the time was sort of the biggest IT company in South Africa. And then, for the older viewers, there was a thing called the dot-com bubble that exploded, and then the IT industry was hit really hard. Many people losing their jobs, shares were dropping, and I was obviously an intern at Dimension Data. And suffice to say, I didn't really get an extension to my contract to become a full-time employee. And then trying to get a job in the industry was like near impossible, because you had this job market that was flooded with a lot of people that got laid off because of this dot-com bubble that exploded. And so the only real alternative was to start our own business, right? So we started like writing applications for cell phone shops, when you book in your phone, and then it creates like a technician job card. And then, we created some point of sale systems, and we're making software for some other smaller companies like friends and people we knew. So to kind of answer your question, there wasn't really like this big vision or this gap that we saw, and we ran into sort of start this business. It was sort of like that there was no alternative but needing to start something ourselves. And yeah, that was sort of where Elemental was born. Yeah.
So say there wasn't a specific gap that you saw in the market. How has the company itself evolved from when you first started? As you mentioned, you started building apps for like small shops for people to book the phones in. How has the company evolved from that initial stage to what it looks like now?
Yeah. So, in the beginning, we didn't really have a real vision. We'd take on any kind of project just to keep ourselves busy. And we're obviously like really young guys, really inexperienced. We didn't really have a very long-term outlook. So, I think, and I'll touch on this a little bit later, but we were basically programmers being forced to start a business. So like we knew coding, we didn't know business, right? So fast forward, our vision obviously over time has evolved quite a lot. So we're much more focused on who's, our ideal client profile, our ICP, so who fits that, who doesn't fit that. So that means like we're a lot more selective of our clients and our projects that we've taken on. Our vision also includes, constant growth. Obviously, most companies or all companies should be focusing on that. And then, one of the things is that our vision also includes, very strong growth into the international market, growing our international client base. So today we're about 25 people, consisting of developers, project managers, testers, and then sort of, other finance, HR people, as well as some business analysis type people. So, from a small two-man business to where we are now, that's sort of in a high-level nutshell of our growth.
And during that growing stages, what were some of those biggest challenges that you faced where now you've established some form of understanding like, oh, we're building something, it's growing. What were those initial challenges in terms of establishing a fixed company that actually looks like a company and to one that's now established?
Yeah, so I think some of the challenges are, hiring people, when do we make our first hires? Who are they? And then, being a young company, hiring the right people is not always possible because of budget constraints. So, I think that's quite a challenge. And then also just kind of taking a step back and look at the bigger picture and defining like, what are we, who are we, and what aren't we? So being like very clear on what we want to do, where we want to grow to. And we didn't always have like such a very strong vision.
Yeah.
We're kind of like working a lot in the business day to day, getting clients, doing projects, billing, and then, sort of in the trenches kind of thing, So I think that's a big challenge, now we've obviously got the luxury to step away and look at the business a lot more and be less operationally involved.
Yeah. So when you started, as you mentioned, you started this thing as a programmer, not as a business individual. So now you are the CEO of this company. What does that role look like for you now from when you initially started?
Yeah. So the role basically entails, looking at the business. Where are we? Where are we going? What is our strategy? What is our positioning? Who are our clients? What can we improve? What's happening in the industry from a technology point of view? What sort of disruptions are there? And like, what does our team need to look like? Who are the next hires? What are the next sort of positions that we need to hire for? Yeah. So I would say that is pretty much like my role now.
And do you miss the initial being part of the grind, like building the apps at the beginning? Or have you stepped away from that? Or are you still kind of involved in that process a little?
No, I don't code. I haven't coded for probably like 10, 12 years. So I think I do miss it sometimes where, sometimes I can jump in and fix something or improve something or, that's a nice thing about development or programming is that you literally can build something or write some code and there's an output, there's an outcome. You can see it or there's some sort of result, which is quite nice. But I think that the path that I've taken is actually the correct path in a sense that I'm letting our developers do the development, and me not doing development. I think it's very good. I think you have to do it full time. You have to keep learning, keep sharpening the sword, and the company needs someone like me to be at the head, myself and my business partner, driving the company forward, thinking about the company and implementing like bigger changes, like longer term changes. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So now I want to touch on the cracks of the company itself and see what you guys do. So we'll build on that a little bit. You've worked with major brands within, let's say, BMW, Google and whatnot, but you have this dedicated multi-stage process specifically for startups. Why maintain this startup focus within the company, and why is this important division in terms of looking at startups and working with startups?
Yeah. So, working with startups and scale-up founders, it means that we can move quite quickly and, compared to like big corporates who take very long. So, speed is there, and we can really be a tech partner to them and be by their side as they sort of go through the journey of conceptualizing, building and launching these tech products.
Yeah.
So, there's so many good ideas, and there's many like niche solutions that need to be developed and that are being developed. And for us, we want to be a part of that journey. We want to make this happen. And, for us, it's really rewarding and energizing, building highly impactful products that have a real impact on our clients and their users, and the technology is directly impacting their growth. I think that's really attractive to us, to why we work with sort of startups and scale-ups and the founders of those companies.
Also, I want to give the audience a validation of all the different genres that you get within the startup. So you get a prototype, you get an MVP, and you get the full-fledged product. Can you run us through those stages that you'd have to go through? What's an MVP, and what's a prototype, and what's a full-fledged product, and how do you guys go about distinguishing this product for founders?
Yeah, so a prototype is typically a set of wireframes that have been designed. And if anybody doesn't know what a wireframe is, it's basically like a skeleton design of a screen. So it could be like a web application, a mobile app, or some sort of software application. So think about all the screens have been designed in very like rudimentary format, like not much graphics and maybe a little bit of color, or maybe even black and white. And essentially these are kind of mapped together, right, to illustrate the different user journeys of the product. The user, typically the founder, can click through the different screens and mimic what a user would experience, but without any functionality. So for example, there's a sign-up process and the user has to complete a form or maybe a bunch of steps in the sign-up process. Once they've completed it, there's a success message, and then maybe they need to validate their email from a link that's sent to the email account. So there'll be like a validation screen. So it basically will like highlight those steps in a very quick and easy to understand and visual format. I think that's key, is like people, learn and understand visually much easier, but it helps them to basically play around with different user journeys. But just to reiterate, there's no functionality that's been developed at all in the stage. So like when you're signing up, there's nothing that's getting saved or anything like that. So that's a prototype. And then an MVP, and I know we'll talk a lot about MVPs, basically consists of building, again, whatever it is, like a web app or mobile app or website, whatever the client needs. And it's basically the most leanest and minimal set of features and functionality to launch with. So that users can basically test whether their idea or concept has got traction. So it shouldn't include nice to have features or features that aren't necessarily needed for launch, hence the name minimum viable product. And then a fully fledged product is basically, as the name suggests, is a very comprehensive version of the product that includes, many advanced features, many functionalities, and, probably integrations with third-party platforms, reporting systems, dashboards, automation. So many of the features that are included in this version of the product, the fully fledged product, have been validated that they're needed, and they've subsequently been designed, developed, and launched into the product.
Yeah, and let's say now I have this app idea, and I want to add like a like button. I want to add follow, share, and whatnot. So I have all these 10 things. Why do you put such a large emphasis on scoping when it comes to at the early stage of building this MVP product for the founder to figure out what features are important for the app and what features should be removed? How do you go through that process?
Okay. So good question. So just before I answer that question, so a lot of founders think that their platform, whatever it is, their product needs a whole lot of features, but in reality, it probably needs less features than they think. And sometimes it's a little bit of an ego thing. They want to have more in the platform than what's actually needed. So why we want to keep the features to a minimum is because we want to get to market quickly. We want to build something simple, design and build something simple, get it out there, get people to test it, get people to use it, and then go, yeah, this has got some value. It's solving a problem, or, there's some positive feedback and people want something like this. So in order to know what features or functionality that could be included or should be included, there's quite a nice framework called the Moscow framework, right? So this has got nothing to do with the city of Russia, by the way. It's an effective framework for basically prioritizing features that should be included in the MVP. So, you've got a whole bunch of features that you want to build, like you said, I don't know, follow, like, whatever. There's maybe loyalty features, maybe there's reporting features, maybe there's integrations with third-party platforms, maybe dashboards down the line and automated procedures, things like that. So all these features are grouped into 4 categories, and this is kind of where the name Moscow comes from, right? So you've got the M for Moscow, which means must have. So these are basically essential features that the MVP, it can't function without these, So these features address the core problem and basically aid the product in delivering its main value. So you can think of these must-have features in a way that if they weren't included in the product is unusable. So, for example, if you have like a food delivery app, let's use, I don't know, Mr. Delivery or Uber Eats for those overseas who don't know what Mr. Delivery is. Without order placement and payment processing, like, you have no food delivery app. So these are like 2 must-have features, right? So that's the M for Moscow. Then you've got the S, so MOS. So this is should have, So this is an important feature, but it's not critical, but it still enhances the value of the app and the user experience. However, they aren't included in the MVP because the MVP can still function without them. So again, it depends on the effort needed and the complexity to design and develop these features, which will determine whether they should or shouldn't be included. So for example, again, if we talk about the food delivery app, order tracking, it's quite a nice to have feature. It's really great from a user's perspective to see where their order is on a little map. But if the food delivery app doesn't have that, a user could still order and pay for their food and receive it. So, it's not a critical feature, but it's a very high valued. So it should have it, but it doesn't necessarily, must have it. Yeah. Then we move on to the sort of the third category, which is could have. So that's the MOSC. So could have. And these are kind of like really nice to have features that have a low impact on the core functionality, but they still add some sort of value in some shape or form. So again, with the food delivery app, a could have feature could be like a loyalty program, or like a review system, So it could have it. It mustn't have it, and it shouldn't have it, but it could have it, So again, it's adding some sort of value. And then the W is at the end of the Moscow, the name. And that this is essentially the 4th category of where you group features into, and it stands for won't have. So these are features that are not necessary and, can be reconsidered in future versions of the product, but for various reasons, they aren't included for now. So either they're like too complex or too costly, or they're just not essential at validating the core idea. So yeah, that's the Moscow framework. And by applying a Moscow framework or even other similar frameworks, teams like ours can focus on delivering the most critical functionality and features first, meaning we can go to market quicker and we can have like a much more refined or leaner MVP to launch with.
So we spoke about how the MVP's goal is to help us go to market quicker.
Yes.
How does a well-defined MVP specifically help in validating market assumptions, and how does it kind of help de-risk the market in terms of you going to market so you know if there's a viable market for this product that you kind of entering? How does developing an MVP help with that?
So essentially, you're trying to confirm that your MVP is adding value, right? So you're trying to confirm that your MVP is solving a problem. And by launching a sort of a streamlined MVP, you get users to interact with it, you get users to transact, and you get feedback through that, So if there's a lot of uptake, there's a lot of engagement, and maybe there's some other data points, you can start determining, wow, this thing has taken off like wildfire and people really love it. And, the feedback that we're getting from users and the data that the system is generating shows that there's a lot of traction and that this is actually highly valuable. Or on the contrary, like maybe there's like such little interaction and, people are signing up, but then they're not doing much more, then it shows you like, hey, you're kind of on the wrong path. And maybe it's to do with marketing of the MVP as well. But, that sort of gives you a platform of which to get feedback and understand like, well, we're speaking to users, they're signing up, but then they're not doing whatever it is we want them to do. Why is that? And then you can start understanding your value proposition, and that's where you can sort of pivot and change direction if you need to, or refine things to make the offering a little bit better.
So let's say now I've spoken to you and I've given you my app idea, and we've gone through the scope stage and we have the minimum viable product and ideas that we want to have on this app. What's the next practical steps after we've have this outline of, this is what it looks like? How do you go about advising founders in terms of the development path? Are we going to go to no code, low code, or are we just going to scrap and start from the beginning and just design this thing from scratch? Which one of those is viable depending on what you're trying to build?
Yeah. So just up front, we're not really big fans of no code and low code platforms, and we prefer to build a solid MVP that forms the base of the project for years to come. Obviously, if the concept and the product is successful. So what we do is with clients is we will, do some sort of discovery with them. We'll unpack their idea. We'll workshop their idea. We'll also push back on certain things, so they might go, wow, we really want to build this feature, and we as a team will go, that's not a really good idea. There's other ways to do it, or there's quicker or more efficient ways to do it, or let's park that for future, right? So let's say we've defined what goes into the MVP, the scope of work is clear. The next steps from that is essentially we'll map out the roadmap of the product in terms of what needs to be designed, what needs to be developed, and then all the sort of modules in between that. And then we plan that feature development with our project managers and the interface design with our team. And then we basically roll this out, and then we as we get to certain milestones, we engage with the client. We show them, hey, this is what we built. This is what we've done, and we get feedback from them. And, if it's a more of an agile approach, we can chop and change and essentially reiterate like that until we've finalized the MVP, we've tested it, and we've launched it. Yeah.
So you've touched on this idea that currently the scheme of things is build and get it out and see what happens. And with Elementor, you guys put a large emphasis on debug the process, check if this thing's working correctly. How do you balance that desire of moving fast, being first to market, with giving individuals time to like, hey, let's iron out all the issues before we launch? How do you get people to kind of balance that scheme of things?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question because, there's this sort of sentiment that let's just launch stuff, get it out there. And, if there's issues, we'll sort it out. So what I can say is, we are not really big fans of launching platforms quickly that are full of bugs. Like we feel that that's not the right way to do it. And we always prefer to do things properly, right? And there's a number of reasons for that. But I think the main thing is that, you want to have something quality, and you've got one real chance to engage with the user. And if their experience is bad or if there's bugs or whatever, it creates a very bad first impression, So we don't like this, launch it, even if it's got bugs, and then we'll fix the bugs once it's live, and, users kind of need to bear with it. We don't like that. And then, we also don't want to build something very quickly, scrap it together, hack it together, and then test it, and then, throw it away. We prefer to do it, structured correctly from the start. So even if the MVP is minimal in terms of the number of features and functionality, we still want to make sure that the platform is structured for growth and we can build onto it. We don't want to just build something, test it, and then rebuild it. It's quite a costly exercise. You're going to go backwards. So with a bit more effort up front and a bit more of a thorough approach, you can still get away with an MVP, but then you can just use that as a solid foundation for building things on top of that in the future. And then in terms of the speed, right? Again, it's a speed versus quality balance. So again, if you want to build a quality product, even if it's an MVP, you can sacrifice speed up to a certain point, but you don't want to do it, where it compromises the quality of the product. So what we typically do is we'll do a lot of things in parallel on the project. So for example, we'll do interface design and we'll do backend development and maybe like designing the database at the same time. These things can run in parallel. And then that way you're shortening the project's overall time and you're still able to get to market fairly quickly. But then when you launch, you're really confident that it's a well-built product that's been tested thoroughly and, users are going to have a good experience.
Okay. So now let's touch on, as we've touched on, we've gone through the stages of, we've spoken about the startup idea. We've gone through the MVP. We've gone through the scoping stages of this platform. And we've gone through the debugging stages of this platform. Now we are going live. We are launching this product. What's the immediate thing as a founder that you need to do once you go live in order to keep track of or analyze the traction and the feedback that you're getting? And how do you utilize that feedback that you get to kind of add on features onto your app or your product that you're designing? And how do you do that in a positive way that you are looking at your customer base? You're like, oh, this is what they want, and this is what I should add onto the app. How do you go about doing that?
Yeah. So for founders to know, like, whether it's successful, they've got some sort of expectation in their mind, whether it's on paper or not, of kind of like what they really would like to get from this launch, right? So, whether the feedback and engagement they get matches that expected kind of engagement, that's sort of a good measure of whether there's enough traction or not and whether, the MVP is actually serving its purpose. The MVP should obviously also encompass some sort of data tracking and usage. So, for example, if you want users to sign up and transact, the system or the platform should store this information, So you can look at the information and then really analyze it. And then obviously, founders can also run surveys that are sort of independent of the product to ask users for their sort of feedback and insights. Yeah. And then that basically will also dictate to them where or not their sort of MVP is on track or not.
And as a founder, when do I know when it's the right time to start adding new features onto the app? After we've launched and after I've started getting feedback, when is the right time to be like, okay, this feature needs to be added? Was there such a demand for it to be added?
Yeah. So when we engage with founders initially and we help them scope out their project, we often have already identified many features beforehand that should form part of the product, the fully fledged product. So we've already, documented these features and we've also prioritized them at a sort of a high level, based on their impact and value to the user. Obviously with, things like Moscow, that comes in here quite nicely. And then also, in terms of like the cost and time required to build certain features also impacts the prioritization. So we kind of already know when to roll out certain features and why, and the sort of effort and complexity and time required and costs. But there might be times when you launch the MVP and there's engagement and there's also these surveys that give you feedback. And there might be something completely that we haven't thought about in the product roadmap initially that that comes in and needs to be factored in. So again, it kind of like, it needs to be weighed up in terms of what is the sort of value that it's going to add to users? What is the effort needed to build it? And what is the time and cost to build it? And then, based on all those sort of criteria, founders can prioritize it and can shift, different features around in terms of priority, and then release those features in the order of priority. I think being agile in approaching the future features is key to kind of like, rolling out features that are going to have the most impact.
And based on your extensive experience of being in this space, what are some of the, let's say, one or two biggest misconceptions that founders have with regards to building the MVP stage, especially during the first early stages? What are some of those mistakes that you keep on seeing founders make, and that could be easily rectified during the first early stages of building an MVP?
Yeah, no, good question. I touched on this before, but I would say that, we often see founders wanting to build and include features that are not necessary for the MVP. And again, I say the ego maybe comes into it, or they want to have a really nice product with all these shiny, features. But the reality is that we don't know if users are even going to use some features, right? So you're going to waste time and money building something, I don't know, let's say a loyalty system or like a notification system or whatever. And we don't know if users are going to use it. Again, we have to go back to the founders and say, keep it simple. Really, really the core things that are needed. Let's get that. Let's get those features only in the MVP. So I think that's the one thing. And then another mistake, or maybe not a mistake, but where people go wrong or founders go wrong is that they want to include features into their product, maybe even after the MVP, that they base on a gut feeling or maybe even ego again, that they want to add as part of their product, but they haven't validated enough that this feature will actually add value and actually that users will use a feature like that and it's going to, be used. I would say spend a bit more time validating, if say you want to build in some sort of notification system or loyalty system as an example, is that what users really want? Will they use it? Will that add to their experience? Will it make them want to engage with the platform more? You need to kind of ask your users and your audience and determine from them, because ultimately, like, they are the ones who are using your product.
Yeah. No, that's definitely true. And on that, after you're done building the app and it's launched, you kind of offer support and maintenance. Why is this ongoing relationships very important for founders with regards to building the app, keeping it functioning, debugging it? Why is this long-term relationship so important for you guys?
Yeah, it's extremely, vital for these products that they need to be supported and maintained, as well as tweaked. As these platforms grow, there's more features and functionality added. There's, more things that need to be maintained. But then also as you bring on more users, there's more transactions, there's more data, there's more, media that's being stored, databases are growing, more integrations are done. It's quite standard to have support and maintenance in place. And then as the complexity increases, you need even more support and maintenance. And it's just to ensure that the platform is always running smoothly, and is very preventative, so you don't want to be like reactive. You want to be proactive in terms of, potentially identifying issues and fixing them, rather than users experiencing bugs and then you have to react to that and fix it. And it's not a good user experience. So it's kind of part and parcel in the industry, but a lot of people don't actually do that. And then just to kind of touch on, you're saying about the long-term success of the product and, so not only is it support and maintenance, it's also, from our point of view, it's more of a relationship, right? We want to see ourselves as tech partners to our clients. They know their business really well. They know the industry really well. They don't always know tech really well. So they're also looking to us to guide them. They might not know of some new technology or what's possible. So we need to go to them and say, listen, there's this thing that you could do, or you could do in the WhatsApp API integration, or you could do whatever, using some sort of AI tool. They need to be guided by us in terms of what's available. So it's more of a partnership, a tech partnership, rather than a sort of a service provider relationships. So we're guiding our clients through the journey, pushing back on some things that they might want to do as well. It works really well. They're getting sort of excellent advice and guidance, and they can also then focus their efforts on their product, their users, and their industry. So I think it's key for the growth of products and the health of products. So yeah, extremely important.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, this relationship, you've had nearly 20 years in business within this space. What's the single most important lesson that you've learned about building and sustaining successful relationships with these organizations that you've worked with? And how does it differ with regards to working with established companies like BMW to working with startups?
So I would say the key to maintaining good relationships, obviously, number one is communication, which is a given. Like we need to communicate, overly communicate. But I would say, from our point of view, the most important thing is to be thorough, right? So be thorough in all aspects of the project. So that starts from like your initial engagement. When a client comes to us, we need to spend time. We need to get detailed in terms of what it is they want. And so, from our initial engagements to the development, to the testing, everything needs to be thorough. We want to build products that we're proud of, products that our clients are proud of, and products that are making a big impact. Also, I don't think that changes whether we're engaging with a big company or like a smaller company. I think it's a process that works, and it's a process that clients value. And, ultimately it's just a good value that we need to keep to in order to keep our clients happy and to keep growing our business.
And in this lifespan of being part of this journey, has there been any significant mistake that you guys have made as a company that you've been like, this is a mistake, let's not make this mistake ever again going forward? And you've learned from that throughout the 20 years that you've been running this?
Yeah, look, any company running for 20 years has probably made lots of mistakes. But I think I'll share something that it's not necessarily a mistake, but I think there's value in me sharing this. So we've always been a development company building web apps, software, mobile apps, things like that. And, 2017, 2018, we'd always be completing clients' projects, whether it's their website or web app or whatever. And then often they'd ask us, guys, great, we built this cool product or website, we need it marketed. Can you guys do the marketing for us? And we're like, we don't know marketing. We're not marketers. So sorry, we can't help you. We only do development. And we actually decided that because the requests were so much that we actually built our own internal marketing division. So we hired some very skilled and experienced people. And we launched a marketing division within our business, and it actually did like pretty well. We gained quite a lot of clients, and we could also upsell to our existing clients, or complementary sell to our clients. And that was growing slowly but surely. And then sort of COVID happened, and marketing budgets were cut, and then we kind of started to really struggle to kind of some clients cancel their campaigns because there was lockdown and things like that, or there was travel restrictions. So we struggled with maintaining our marketing clients, and we actually struggled to grow our marketing division with new clients because we're kind of a development company offering marketing services. So why would you use us over a specialist marketing company?
Yeah.
So we kind of figured out that, hey, we need to stick to what we do best. And then I think in 2021, we said, listen, let's close this marketing division. We're probably still profitable, but it was detracting from our focus. So we said, let's just focus on development of the products that we do and the projects that we do. And we're not going to offer marketing services. And if clients want marketing, we can point them in the right direction, but we're not going to do any marketing for our clients. So we closed that division and we kind of returned to what we did. So I think the lesson here is that being hyper-focused is actually a very good thing. And we aren't seeing the jack of all trades, but we're seeing the master of one. So it makes positioning for us much, much more clearer. And then when companies engage with us, they know that they're dealing with a company that only does development, and they're not speaking to a sort of a digital marketing company that does a bit of web development, but does, video content, marketing, PR, and, they know that, hey, this is all we do and we live and breathe development. So I think focus is sort of the key thing here, and going deep, going, very niche is actually what the lesson is here. So I hope that resonates with some of the audience.
Yeah, well, I guess that touches on some of our conversation on regards to scoping and just finding your niche product that actually works for you, where you guys were trying to expand beyond what you initially started with. So I guess that's very important I think as a founder, when you go through your early journey, is to find that product and be a master of that specific product, which is very important. So as we reach the end of our conversation, what's that one piece of advice that you have for founders that have an MVP or they have an idea that they're working on? What do they need to do to get the journey started for them?
So, yeah, an idea. I mean, everyone's got ideas. There's lots of good ideas and there's tons of bad ideas. So I think, a lot of people go, oh, great, I've seen this little gap in the market. If I build this thing and I get 2% of the market, that's thousands of users, and I monetize them at X dollars or rands or whatever per user per month, then I forecast it and I'm going to do really well. Yeah. It's all said and done, like much easier as a concept than in real life. So I would say try and validate it as much as possible. Like speak to a lot of people, and really be, hard with yourself, like, is the feedback that I'm getting, are they telling me like that this really works? And, once you've like really gotten a lot of feedback and people say, yeah, listen, great, that would change our lives. It would save us time. It would make us more money, whatever it is, make them more efficient, and find out like, what would they pay for something like that? Because I think that's the thing is that, people often say, if we launch this product and it could do X, Y, and Z, would you use it? Would you pay for it? Yes. And then when the time comes and you've built and launched it and it comes a time for them to pay for it, there's a bit of resistance. So that's a tricky one, but I would say try and validate your idea as much as possible. And I would say make sure that your product's really solving a problem. There's a lot of, I think the number one reasons why startups fail is they build something that's actually not solving much of a problem, So really find a problem and really make sure that your solution is solving that problem. But if you're building something for your ego or you think it's going to solve a problem, the chances are that it's not going to work. So try and validate it as much as possible with as many people as you can, even before you start thinking of an MVP. Then make sure it's solving real world problems, because people pay for that. That's like all these platforms and apps we use. It solves problems. It makes us quicker, it makes us more money, or makes us more efficient, or So that's my sort of parting piece of advice, I would say, to tech entrepreneurs. But it's hard, like it's it sounds all glamorous. I'm going to build a startup, raise some money, sell it for millions. Like it's so hard, like it's so you really get niched. And what I can say also is that a lot of the companies that are finding success is that they have been in their industry for quite a few years, whatever industry that is, and they know the industry really well, and they know the stakeholders and the players in the industry, and they find a little gap in that industry. And that's often where there's a lot of success, because it's not like coming from a different industry. Oh, I'm in the travel industry and I'm going to do something for the, I don't know, restaurant industry or the automotive industry or whatever, in the industry, they've done it, they've been working in it, so they already know how things work, and then they've just got a very niched problem, and they've found a very good solution to that problem.
That's a great piece of advice. And the last thing I need to ask you, if people want to reach out to you, the people that listened to this episode, how do they do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Angelo Zanetti. Our company is www.elemental.agency. So those are the best ways to find us. Reach out to me, ping me, send me a DM, whatever, on email, angelo@elemental.agency, and happy to discuss this further. Very passionate about this space, and happy to help.
Well, and that is it from us. I look forward